Hi everyone, I'm going to talk to you today about how we've been preparing to put insulation into an old house for the very first time. So this house that I've been working on is 100 years old and it's in a historic district. So we cannot remove the exterior siding, it has to stay as it is. And the house being 100 years old, it's never had insulation in it. In fact, it doesn't have exterior sheathing, it doesn't have house wrap, it doesn't have all the normal things that we're used to finding in a conventional building. But because I'm renovating the house and I want to sell it, I want it to be comfortable for the people who are going to live here. And one of those selling points is to put insulation in the house. It'll cut down on energy bills for the house, but it'll also just make it a much more comfortable house than it would have been 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago if you tried to add air conditioning. But the tricky part about putting insulation into an old house is you cannot just dump insulation into these walls. Like I said before, there's no sheeting, there's no house wrap. These walls have been getting moisture in them from rain and humidity and air temperature changes for 100 years. And they've been fine because they've always been able to dry out. There's always been that space and that air circulation in the wall that allows them to dry out. But it's not very comfortable that way for us to live in those conditions. So we want to insulate. But if you suddenly just throw insulation into these walls up against that siding that was exposed back here, you're going to take away the ability for that wall to dry out. And when that happens, you get things like paint peeling off of your siding and mold in your walls. If you just wanted to put insulation in the walls, then you should take off the old siding, put on a sheathing, put on a house wrap and an air barrier, and then a rain screen, and then re-side. Because we're not going to touch the outside siding, we had to leave it in place for the historic board, and the budget just doesn't allow for us to take it all off and add all that stuff on the outside and then put it all back on again. So we're just addressing it from the inside. So what we did is we wanted to create and keep an air circulation path for it to dry out behind the siding. So we're actually using this dimple board. It's sort of a plastic matting. It's kind of rigid. It's got these little dimples on it. It comes in a roll, and we just rolled it out and cut the sheets of it to fit in between each stud bay in the house, which is tricky because every stud bay is a different size because it's an old house. But with these ridges on it, what we're doing is we're actually placing this towards the outside, and it creates this 1/2 inch space between this back of the siding and where the insulation will start. And that just allows any moisture that's going to come in, any like liquid rain that's going to come in from the siding to continue to be able to drain out and dry out. So there's that air circulation place for that to happen there. This is a product that's normally made for the exteriors of foundations, but it seems to work well for this as well. So in addition to cutting and placing these to fit in between each stud, we then air sealed around each. So it basically attaches the plastic to the stud itself. We didn't want to leave any place for air to come in from the outside or to come in from the inside to go outside, because that moving air can carry moisture with it. And so if you bring in a lot of moisture on that moving air, it can get trapped inside the new insulation that's going to be in the wall and cause condensation and other problems. Hopefully by air sealing this plastic to the studs and the tops and bottoms, we're creating a space for the siding to drain to the outside and dry out, and sort of creating a much more airtight house than it was. The windows, being original, are still going to be leakier than brand new windows would be. But we have restored all the windows, and we've made the upper windows to be fixed, and so they're caulked into place, and the lower movable parts of the windows have had weather stripping added to them, so they should be less leaky than they were before. But that's still going to allow, there's enough air movement there that I think that will allow fresh air to move in and out of the house without having to add an actual like ERV or some sort of fresh air circulation system into this house. This isn't going to be a super tight house. It's not going to be passive house standards, but it's going to be better than it was. And what I just wanted to do was make sure to protect the walls from any moisture and condensation as vapor transfers through the walls. The other thing we're going to do is blow cellulose insulation into here. Cellulose is pretty good at absorbing and releasing moisture in the air. And on top, the drywall that we're going to put on these exterior walls is not going to have any paper batting. We're going to use a fiberglass mat drywall or something similar that is mold resistant, so that just in case there is vapor transfer and condensation inside these walls, it won't grow mold on the back of the drywall. So this process of cutting this plastic and installing it into the wall, it was super tedious. It took us a long time, a lot of help, just a lot of fingers and cutting and getting into dark, dirty places, and it was not fun. None of us liked it. But I just felt like it was super important to do that rather than just blowing insulation into the wall, because I didn't want to mess with the integrity of the wall system or the siding on the outside or the health of the people that are going to be living here. So I felt like it was important. It just was tedious and not fun. We used a combination of pressure adhesive, pressure sensitive tapes. We used some spray air sealing that's specifically made for air sealing gaps. We used caulks. We used lots of different methods to try and air seal around this plastic. And I think next time what I would do is put up the plastic and then maybe just cut paper air barrier, like a house wrap that's an air barrier, and use that over the top of it and try to air seal that to the studs instead, because trying to get this plastic perfectly fit and right and filling all those holes was like I said, pretty tedious, not fun. But that's the lesson that I learned. But I'm glad that we did it, and the insulation is starting to go in, and I'm super excited to see that. One of the other things I wanted to show you that we did for insulation was to actually insulate the cavity between the windows where the window weights are. Typically in older houses, you have both window sashes functioning. They move up and down, and so there's like 2 levels of window weights hanging down in these cavities. And we actually made the top sash not functional anymore. We made it a fixed window, which kind of served a couple of purposes. We were able to caulk it into place, which makes it less air leaky. And we were able to take out one of the rows of window weights, which happened to be the back row, which allowed us to then give us enough space in this channel to be able to insulate. And a lot of times in old houses, when people come in and renovate, if they don't switch out the windows or do this, then they wind up not being able to insulate this cavity, which just leaves a big giant uninsulated hole in your wall. But we insulated it using actually CORK. CORK is one of my favorite materials to work with. It's an amazing building material. It's all natural. It's rigid, so we were able to just cut it with a saw and place it in here. We did use a little bit of adhesive behind it to hold it in place. But because it's rigid and not fluffy like some insulations, when the window weights move up and down in the channel, they don't catch on any of the texture fluff or anything. They just can slide up and down in front of this cork here. And that way at least gives a little bit of insulation here for this space. And it is still vapor permeable, so that vapor in the walls and in the air can still move back and forth. It won't affect the siding on the outside or the wood trim on the outside, actually. Cork is just such a nice material to work with because it is all natural. I'm not worried about it being toxic when me or my coworkers are working with it. I'm not worried about the sawdust that's created when you cut it. If you're using rigid foam or whatever, that sawdust that's created when you cut it can blow away in the wind, and now you've got petroleum and plastics and things in your ground just blowing around. This is basically just tree bark, so it's just kind of like putting mulch on the ground. The resins in cork make it pest resistant and fire resistant while still allowing it to be vapor permeable. It's just got a lot of great characteristics. Cork forests are some of the most biodiverse forests in the world, which is another great reason to use cork. It's just an amazing product. But I just wanted to show you that we were able to insulate this channel around the windows with this cork, and that way we didn't leave any gaps in this old house uninsulated.